start by inviting Dr. Rose Kimani, who is a project manager with DW Academy. She has a PhD from the University of Beirut, but she's also done some great work with media and communications and teaches media students as well. She's very passionate about research and media viability, and she's been leading this team. And she's going to come and make a very quick presentation, and then we'll hear some few people tell us about this project, and then we'll get the result of that finding and then get into a discussion with some of our experts to find out what's been going on with this project. So let's start by welcoming Dr. Rose Kimani to tell us a little bit about what's been going on with this project.
Thank you, Ben. I think I always have this problem. The mics are usually way above my head, but yeah, at least this one is somewhere near mouth level. So it's a pleasure to be here today to talk about the innovation and media viability research that we have carried out for the past couple of years in East Africa. So the first phase was a literature review. We looked at all the literature that we could find about media viability, and we published a report already about this, which is available in our project website. And now for the second phase, what we did was, apart from looking at the environment in which the media are operating, because this is what the literature was focusing on, for the second phase, we went into the media houses to ask them what particular challenges they were facing as far as viability was concerned. We were looking at viability from an organizational perspective. But before I get deep into the research findings, I would like to invite my compatriot Claire Mogere, who is at AKU, the director of the Media Innovation Center, and she will just give us a bit of background about the project and why we do what we do. So welcome, Claire. She is online. She's on the way, she's on the way.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you. This is a brief overview of the Media Future project. When we mentioned East Africa project, I work with a partnership with AKU and the DW Academy. And it is fully funded by the German Development Bank, which is the German Development Bank, which is So the project has two components: the media viability consultancy, which is implemented by the Media Academy, and the Media Innovation Center, which is implemented by AKU, and research is co-party, implemented by both partners. And so I won't dwell so much on what the other things that we do, because we mentioned both yesterday. But just to mention that research plays a key role in everything that we do, even for the medical intelligence, the course of the medical intelligence are informed by research, the trainings that we give are informed by research. And so this is a key milestone for the project, and we launch this report. Back to you.
Thank you, Claire. I think the sound wasn't so great, but I hope we understood some of what she said about the setup. It's a research between DW Academy and the Aga Khan University. So to give us more context about why we decided to do the research, I will invite Professor George Nyabuga to give us a few words, just giving us the background. Let's welcome him with some applause.
Thank you, Rose, and thanks, Claire. Mine is very simple. It is to represent my boss, Professor Nancy Ibuka, who unfortunately couldn't be here, to do that presentation. And whatever I say is based on what she sent me to present. So any mistakes, don't blame me, please. That's an important caveat. Anyway, being an academic institution. And, I think the media around the world oftentimes uses research findings to make any decision with regard to matters that are affecting them. And you know that issues of sustainability and viability are critical to media, given the kind of challenges that they are currently facing. As you know, very many media houses have closed down. Some have had to scale down on their work, including laying off so many people, or cutting down on investments that they've made on some more expensive typologies of, journalism, if you may, like investigative journalism. And consequently, this research is important in East Africa, particularly in an era where we have to deal with challenges as a result of COVID-19, but also financial, environment in which the media operates, and sometimes a political environment that, also affects how the media operates in East Africa. And this is a collaborative effort, as you know, funding from DW and other organizations, and part of the Media Futures East Africa project. And this research was conceptualized to provide empirical data, and here we insist on empirical data, data that is useful, data that is based on real practices rather than sometimes on, theoretical issues. On the media landscape in East Africa, with a bias on innovation and media viability. And I think we've heard so much about innovation and how the media ought to innovate to survive this difficult environment. And other than, the kind of empirical data, of course, this was done with a view of providing evidence on, how the media can be financially sustainable. I know that financial sustainability is always important because it has effects on other matters relating to sustainability. For example, content sustainability and human resource sustainability. So how can you produce content that is interesting, that is appealing, that is entertaining to the various or disparate audiences that we see? And as I was listening to the conversations yesterday, it seems like the younger audiences, who are the majority of the people that the media is trying to appeal to, want a lot more entertainment and content that addresses their needs. And some of those needs include, of course, entertainment, but also information that is critical to their decision-making processes, including their participation in civic life, in democracy, and such important matters. So issues of financial sustainability and viability are important to us as an academic institution, but also our partners that seek to support how the media operates and whether it is going to be sustainable. As you know, if we have an unsustainable and viable media, then it's a challenge to society. And I think that is a message that has been shared numerous times, including during the opening session, where the German ambassador to Uganda said that the media still plays an important role. So, based on the some of the proceedings from yesterday, I dare say that we should celebrate the kind of media that we have, and ensuring the sustainability and viability of the media is critical. So the overall goal of the research was to use this empirical data to develop interventions for news media organizations and improve innovation for media viability in East Africa, and provide data that would help address the current innovation challenges that industry media faces. And let's interrogate some of those terminologies in this first objective: develop interventions for news media organizations. Oftentimes we lack research and the data to come up with innovations, and as such, all the media organizations in this country, and Kenya and Tanzania as well, should look carefully at this report, because it provides data that will be useful to the future of your operations. And this is freely shared because we are interested in a viable and sustainable media that works, that serves a society, that serves democracy, that helps hold the leadership to account. As such, these interventions are key to what it is that we are doing. So, the data itself provides some of those suggestions based, of course, on valid and empirical, valid and reliable conclusions that are helpful or would be helpful to the media as a result of how they want, for example, to appropriate technologies, how to innovate, how to work, how to attract and retain the audiences that we want to see. The other objective was inform the instructional material and pedagogical approaches, of course, at our school, but also at the various other journalism schools. Oftentimes, African scholars and African institutions have been accused of lacking, new knowledge to illustrate the issues that we are dealing with. So Western-centric material is what we have and what we tend to use. And consequently, we, asked whether there is no indigenous or native knowledge that is important in, the kind of instructional material that we have. And as such, this data and this research is helpful in that sense. And we're hoping that all the universities in the region would actually use this research to better illustrate the issues that they are looking at. So we're not, only talking about the theoretical issues, but we have the research to support whatever it is that we are offering. And this would include, many conferences, many workshops, if you may, because, the moment we share this knowledge, I think it becomes very important for us. And the kind of education and quality of, trainings that we have in the region. The third one is develop publishable research papers in peer-reviewed journals. As I said, there's a dearth of knowledge from many parts of Africa, and this should be a result, is a result of, sometimes lack of resources to conduct in-depth research. And the findings then from this research is important in publishing rigorously peer-reviewed journal articles that would be read in different parts of the world. And of course, other than the peer-reviewed journals that would be read by scholars and people that are engaged in that kind of activity, I believe the research findings can be picked up by the media themselves and be published, so that it informs, for instance, people's understanding of how the media landscape currently looks at. And it would also improve, for example, the media and information literacy, because that is something that is important in advancing people's understanding of how the media looks like. Let me share very broadly some of the research findings, just mention a few. That across the region and for all the media sectors, there's a reliance on the same traditional revenue sources, and especially, advertising. This is not very surprising, but nonetheless, we know that advertising has been affected across, media formats, across media platforms. Yesterday, I saw an announcement by Facebook, for example, that they are sacking 11,000 people around the world. This is a result of declining revenue, and especially for traditional media. But it seems like for digital media is suffering as well. So how can we, for instance, make media sustainable and viable if we're just going to rely on advertising, that traditional, sources of revenue? So are there other innovative ways of generating the necessary revenue and necessary financial resources to support media sustainability from the different perspectives, whether you're looking at content sustainability so that this content is diverse, is plural, and is meaningful and impactful to our own societies. Whether we're looking at employing younger journalists like many of our colleagues here, because I think it's important that you're properly remunerated and compensated for all their efforts. And I remember from the first day someone saying that it is important that they are compensated for all the efforts and all the talents that they are. So the acquisition of new talent is also based on getting the revenue that is important. The other finding is that subscription revenue and government funding were found to be positively linked to better financial performance. We know that subscription and other strategies for acquiring revenue have been at least tried by numerous organizations. Sometimes it doesn't work. Paywalls sometimes do not work because, as we said yesterday again, maybe younger audiences are not interested in what is published on legacy media platforms. But nonetheless, I think and I remember, attending one of the sessions where people said that they are willing to pay, a majority of them willing to pay $3 to subscribe to the material. One said $10, and I think that was, quite good if they can pay $10 or $20 for that. But nonetheless, I think we've seen that, there are challenges in there. And as such, there is need to reimagine media financing and equitable formulas to distribute government advertising. Government advertising is one of the biggest sources of revenue for media in East Africa. The other finding is that media houses in the region rate their chances of surviving as news producers in the next 5 years highly. And this is important for me as perhaps an older consumer of news. I remember yesterday again, younger people here saying that the way or that legacy media might not be serving their needs. But I also say that, for that reason, it is important to understand why it is that they are not finding it fit for purpose, and as such, need to develop new ways of attracting that group of, consumers or audiences. I think conversely to what that finding says, there's also a finding that a significant percentage of media houses that are profitable also noted that they are unlikely to survive as news producers in the next 5 years. And, as news producers in the next 5 years. And I think that is important. As such, there need to be balance between news, entertainment, and other content that is meaningful to society. The other finding is that both journalists and managers rate journalistic practices and newsroom management and processes very highly as an indicator of journalism quality. So newsroom management and leadership is important. But the journalist pay, which includes high enough pay to mitigate professionally and ethical behavior and editorial independence, are rated comparatively low. We know that there are challenges, especially in the newsroom, with corruption, with bribery, and such other professional misconduct. And this is across East Africa. And I think this has put or has contributed to trust deficiency that we heard about yesterday. So how can we, for example, improve that trust to ensure that the media continues to serve public interest? And the last finding that I want to communicate is only slightly under half of media houses in the region consider themselves to have adequate access to the technology, equipment, and training journalists need to carry out their tasks and stay current. And one of the interventions that has been carried out by numerous organizations, partners, like DW is capacity building or upskilling of journalists, because it is important that the skills that they possess meet the high demands from the newsrooms. So the question that we leave with you and that can be discussed by the panel is what can be done about the other half that has been left out, because that finding this says that only slightly under half of media houses in the region consider themselves to have adequate access to the technology, to the equipment and training of journalists to carry out their tasks. So what happens to the other half? What happens to many of the students that we currently have, students that we're training to be the future journalists in the different countries? So there's a lot in this report, which is very rich, that will inform many of the discussions that we have here and many of the decisions that will be taken by the media houses. And I encourage the media houses, encourage scholars, encourage the partners to look at this report carefully, because it is important for the future survival of the media, future survival, sustainability, and viability of the media. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. I've got to say, Professor, I wish I had a teacher like you when I was in school. It would have probably been a lot more fun, just the way he talks, the way he looks. You know those school teachers that make you want to go to class every day? Yeah, there seems to be agreement in the room. You know, some people are thinking, I don't want to go to class. Not you, Prof. Thank you so much. So let's now hand back to Dr. Rose, who will just come and give us some highlights from these findings, and then we'll hear from a few more people and then have a discussion. And again, a bit academic, but this is very important because everything that we do in the media must be based on research. Otherwise, what are you doing? You need to be doing what you do based on very solid information. And this project, I think, provides a very good background for us to be able to do that. So Dr. Rose is going to come and share some insights and highlights from that, and then we'll hear from a few more people and then have a wonderful discussion about this.
Thank you, Ben. I hope you're not yet tired of the research details. I hear that research is not exactly everyone's favorite topic, but I think so far so good. So I'm going to talk about the research that we did. If tech allows. So I think, thank you so much, George, because you've already highlighted some of the aspects that we were thinking of. So I'll just go straight to the issues that we were looking at in media houses. We were looking at the structure of the newsrooms, as well as the ownership and business models of the media in East Africa. What are the organizational capacities? What are they good at? What are they struggling with? Then we also looked at the financial performance in 2018 and 2019, just before COVID, to see how are media houses performing at the time. And then we also looked at what was the quality of the content, what was the innovation culture? That is, do media houses rate themselves as innovative, or do they feel that they're really struggling as far as innovation is concerned? We also looked at the impact of COVID-19, because this is something that happened just as we were undertaking our research, and we realized that this would impact the media houses. And we also looked at the journalism culture. So to give you a few definitions, we looked at financial sustainability and quality of journalism. That is what we carry as our definition of media viability. It's not enough for a media house to be financially sustainable. They also need to provide quality content. So that is what informed our thinking. And just to give a few facts and figures, and I believe some of you in the room probably answered this survey. We sent online surveys to journalists in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, to the senior executive in the media house, as well as journalists in the media house. And the responses that we got, you can see on the brown section, where we got several percentages from Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. So for Uganda, 46% of media houses responded. For Kenya, 78%, and for Tanzania, 77%. And the number of people that we had responding was slightly above 1,000. We had 814 journalists and 273 media managers. So these voices are not just from 3, 4, 5 people. It's from at least almost about 1,000 people. And then the responses that we got, we boiled them down to the number of media houses that answered. So then we ended up with responses from 437 media houses, so almost 500. So the findings that I'm going to talk about come from almost 500 media houses across Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And one of the surprises that we had was that in East Africa, the media houses are quite young. Apart from print, which is 11 years old and older, most of the media houses in East Africa are 10 years old and younger. So that tells us in the region, a lot of media houses are still coming up. And the question is, will these media houses survive, or will they go the startup way where a lot of startups fail in the first 5 years? This is a question that we are still asking ourselves. But the irony that we also found was that despite the young age of the media houses, they are still very much relying on traditional revenue sources, which George has also alluded to. For instance, for the digital native organizations, the ones which are purely online, if you look at the first row, that is their main source of revenue. For Kenya, they all use commercial advertising. Uganda, the same. Tanzania, the same. Not so many use sponsored content or related services or products. So this is already a question, which other revenue models could we already start thinking about, apart from relying on the tradition that we are used to? So then a summary about the revenue sources. Still, we found that media houses were using up to 12 revenue sources, but the biggest chunk was commercial advertising. And when it comes to COVID-19, we found 2 sources that were most stabilizing for media houses: those that had subscription revenue and those that got direct funding from government seemed to weather COVID-19 better. So this is again a question: if there are crises, how do we sustain our media houses? Are we saying that we should go back to the government to fund them? Are we saying that we should rely on our consumers who will subscribe to us to keep us afloat? So this is a question which I think we can think about further. And for the digital native, digital news native organizations, that is the media houses that are purely online, we found that if they had more revenue sources, their performance tended to go down. But if they had fewer revenue sources, their performance was more stable. So this is also an issue of, if you as a media manager are working on 15 revenue sources, then sometimes you will not have enough time to deal with other aspects of the media, maybe content or maybe other aspects, such that you spread yourself thin and then your performance goes down instead of going up. So that was another interesting finding. And then for quality of journalism, which George has already alluded to as well, what was ranked highly was the processes, such as fact-checking, such as giving both sides of a story, having different sourcing for news stories. All these were ranked highly. If you look at the first column, which is 4.23, all of them are above 4, and the ranking, the highest ranking was 5. So the newsroom processes were ranked very highly. But when it comes to pay, when it comes to editorial independence, then the media houses were a bit more 50-50 about whether this is what is happening in their media houses or not. So, and then for the innovation culture, a quick one. For Kenya, the TV sector rated themselves as the most innovative, while for Uganda, it is print that rated themselves as the most innovative, followed by radio. And then for Tanzania, it is multimedia organizations that rated themselves as most innovative, as well as TV. So for us, the surprise was print rating themselves as the most innovative in Uganda. And then when it comes to likelihood of survival as news producers, that is, do the media organizations see themselves as producing news in the next 5 years? A big percentage, as you can see from the lower row, a big percentage all said that they think they will still be producing news in 5 years. And this is something that we need to keep in mind and ask ourselves, is that really the case? Will they still be producing news, or will they be more of general content producers? And on a more negative note, as far as intimidation and interference is concerned for journalistic independence, we asked if media houses had experienced any of the incidences that are listed there. Had journalists been arrested? Had they been attacked? Have they had to kill stories or publish stories, whether it's because of political pressure or because of business pressure? And Uganda recorded the highest incidences of attacks, of intimidation, of pressure, while Tanzania recorded the lowest incidences of attacks, intimidation, and pressure. So, and Kenya was somewhere in the middle. So generally in the region, we are still not yet doing well as far as journalistic independence is concerned. We still have some way to go in supporting media freedom. And then finally, in terms of organizational capacities, the most highly ranked organizational capacity was that the media houses have staff from diverse backgrounds, including women and marginalized groups. So all media houses felt that they were doing excellent on this aspect. But the irony was, when we looked at the people who answered our survey, among the journalists, 2/3 were men. Among the managers, 3/4 were male. But the thinking was, we are doing very well as far as diversity is concerned. So I think this is something we need to ask ourselves. What is our understanding of diversity? And then as far as audience research is concerned, many media organizations, specifically radio, said that this is an area they are still really struggling with, and as well as content monetization and new revenue sources, especially in the digital environment. This is an aspect that was laid out, that came out strongly as an area where the media houses feel they do not have the organizational capacity that they need to move forward. So that is just a snippet of the findings. What was key, it is a 74-page report, so I cannot lay out everything, but this is just a snippet of what we found most interesting. And so then I will now hand back over to Ben. If you would like to see the reports, we have them available in soft copy on our project website. And we also have produced a podcast about the report findings, so please feel free to log in and find out more. So I'll hand over to Ben for the next session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Rose. As you have heard, 74-page report. I think Caleb, QR code somewhere, I think it's being shared online. If you want to be able to get a soft copy of that, it might be worth being able to just scour through the pages of this report. There might be some interesting detail to pick up for all the people. It was very interesting to hear that the more the revenue sources, the less the performance. So I guess that for me was one of the things that has stood out, and one that probably needs to be given some attention. So we're just going to hear from 2 or 3 more people very quickly, and then we'll have a discussion on this. And in terms of dissecting some of the findings of this report, I'll start with Mr. Robert Sempala, who is the director for the Human Rights Network for Journalists. And then we'll hear from someone from the Media Council of Uganda, and then someone from the government, before we then have a discussion with some special guests. Thank you. Oh, just a reminder, please tweet about this stuff as we talk about innovation. Our hashtag is EastFest2022, and we'd like to hear what things are catching your attention, what has stood out for you. Would love to know what that is, so please do it. EastFest2022.
Thank you indeed very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in the room. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in the room. That's much better. My name is Robert Sempala. I work with the Human Rights Network for Journalists Uganda, and I'm very happy to be here. I've had a very quick look at the report here, the 74-page report, and I think it's an excellent document that has been authored onto the market for us as actors in the media. And I'm very thrilled by the issues of discussion in this report, more so the focus on the different layers within the media spectrum, looking at the owners, looking at the journalists doing the real work, looking at the mainly the newsrooms, which are the fulcrums of our media houses. So we literally have a report that is comprehensive about so many things that we will need to discuss going forward in terms of media viability, and looking critically at how we can innovate in the new era of technological advancement. It also touches very important issues of adaptability. How are we able to adapt to the technological advancements? Are we all following and pushing in the right track? Are we dilly-dallying and dragging our feet? Are we finding excuses for not being there? It's a very important area of discussion, but it touches another very important issue of trust within the people that we serve. How are we perceived? Are people willing to stand with us as in the media? Are they working with us? Are we leading the way and are they following? Or are they leading the way and we are only following from behind? It's a very important issue given public interest and trust. If we must talk of media viability, we must critically be looking at those areas. I'm very thrilled by the report. A quick look through it shows me that at least there was formidable and exhaustive feedback, but also looking at the structures of media houses and their newsrooms thereof. Are they well positioned to run the show? Do we have sustainable media houses? Do we have the knowledge that is so required for this? Are we talking to the right people in this? Are we heading in the right direction? I am from a media background. I have seen media houses that are too skeletal to even be talked of as newsrooms. I know for a media house where one of the owners once approached to increase the budget for the newsroom, told the manager in that newsroom to say, you can leave the newscaster and one reporter stationed at Parliament. Can Parliament generate news for this media house? Said, how are we even going to sustain it? Says, find a way. Listen to other radio stations. Do plagiarism, and that was at the encouragement of the owner of the media house in a bid to run away from costs that would sustain a media house. So if we are talking of the structure of newsrooms, are we doing the right thing? Are they in-depth and detailed to run the show? If not, then there's a lot of work here that has to be done. Then we're looking at the ownership of media houses. I'm happy to see my brother Kigozi here from the Next Media Group is one of the owners, because the deputy is a very powerful owner of a media house here. And he's just one of them, but the rest of owners are really in this show for many other reasons other than news. Many of them. It's either to do politicking when it matters critically, and so they will employ people who really matter, who will shout loudest when they need their voices to go out to the prospective voters. So if we are looking at the owners here, we must exhaustively discuss their contribution to this cause. Are we engaging the owners the right way? Are we even talking to the owners? Do they even come to these spaces to listen to brilliant ideas that come from a crop of people in this room? Do they even show up? We've severally tried to engage the owners of media houses on these key issues, but the responses are normally very, very elusive. They're trying to run away as fast as they can. Delegating people in those meetings who cannot make decisions, who will still have to go back to them to ask if they must say yes or no. And they never give you feedback in most cases. So it's extremely important that the owners here are being talked about. We need the owners all to follow our way if we must get up there. And then how are we innovating? Many media houses are doing it the very traditional way that used to be done many years ago when we were just growing up. Because they have a newsreader, they have somebody to fish a story. You read a story or you listen to a story, it's so ordinary that you don't even want to listen to the next bulletin, or you do not want to read this newspaper again the next day. So it literally means you're not going to invest in news. So when it comes to innovations, when it comes to creative ways of propagating news, receiving news, propagating it, and getting people interested in reading news on a regular is a key subject for all of us in this room. I'm very happy that the report brings out important information on this, and I'm sure that the discussion will go beyond this room and will continue engaging the people that are here talked about, that were respondents for this report. I'm happy that it's not only a country report, but it's a regional report. So it literally means that we are not leaving our brothers behind, much as we are a bit lagging behind as the host when it comes to intimidation, interference. Uganda is really sitting on the bottom. Because there are many incidents, but if we are going to aggregate them, we are sitting on the top, meaning we are not faring well. So brothers and sisters in this room, we have work to be done in terms of insulating the media from such intimidative acts and interferences. Everybody will tell you here that there are stories that are a bit risky, even when they are factual, even when they are well-sourced, but you won't want to go that way, especially exposing issues of human rights abuses, issues of torture, issues of maluse of offices. Media houses will fear. So they will venture a lot into entertainment, they will venture a lot into arsenal, sports commentaries, and a lot of that, running away from potential dangers. But that is not healthy for the media. I'm so happy that this area was exhaustively touched, and I'm so happy that in the room here, I see my friend Watasa, who ably will want to really show us what is it that we are going to do. I know he's not a man who jumps on the defensive, but he will tell you that this is what we want to do in order to overcome these hurdles. It's extremely important. In a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, I want to commend the Media Challenge Initiative, DW Academy, the Aga Khan University, for bringing us together to discuss such an important document, the report on the state of innovation and media viability in East Africa. It's very important that we always have spaces of this nature to discuss the future of the media from a very informed point of view. Like I see the academia getting on board. It's what we have been lacking for a very long time, getting them to sit with people in the newsrooms, with the managers and with owners to discuss the way forward on the hurdles that the media has had to overcome over time, but with little success. So I'm very happy to be here, and as a rights organization, the Human Rights Network for Journalists Uganda, we are very touched about by the issue of intimidation and harassment. We are doing some work around it, and we're continue doing this work with all the actors in this room to make sure that we scale down on those incidents so as to make the media flourish, so as to create room for viable content, to find space and there are less reprisals from those media houses that generate such content. Thank you indeed for your kind audience. I wish you all the very best, and thank you once again for bringing us together.
Thank you so much, Robert, and very well said. And he has sort of preemptively introduced one of our very special guests, Commissioner Moses Watasa, who is Commissioner for Information Dissemination and Communication at the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance. You're very welcome, sir. It's good to see you today. Thanks a lot for joining us. We will be hearing from him in a little bit, indeed, as Robert has said, to touch on that. But first, let me ask Mr. Okello Peter, who is with the Media Council of Uganda, to also come and share some of his thoughts. Just a reminder to our speakers, there's a screen in front of you that has a timer. When it reaches 0, your head might explode, just saying. So you're able to keep track of the time that you have. And then we'll hear from Commissioner Watasa, and we'll have a wonderful discussion after that.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I don't feel the energy. What's happening? Is it too cold? Okay, that's better now. I would like to recognize all of you in your respective capacities, especially my boss, Mr. Moses Watasa. You're most welcome, sir. I've come here today to speak on behalf of the chairperson, the chairman of the Media Council, Mr. Paul Ekochu, who was to speak, but he had an urgent family engagement, so he couldn't come, and he asked me last evening, or yesterday in the afternoon, to come and represent him here. And when he did that, I was wondering, so what am I going to talk about? So I went back to what we as the Media Council had been doing just before the COVID lockdowns, and even during the COVID, we had a training, online training. And so I was looking at the feedback from the media houses themselves, from the practitioners across the country, what they feel about the media. And so Mr. Robert Sempala has done a good job painting a bit of the picture as we look at it. And it would appear that the research findings, which I've also gleaned through, are consistent with what we've seen out there in the countryside. We are asking that, is our media still relevant? Is it able to guide people to make informed decisions on day-to-day matters, business, politics, environment, climate change? We've seen that in line with the theme of the world is moving so fast. Things are happening. There's geopolitical conflicts, climate change. Uganda is now in the satellite. Uganda is in the orbit. We've joined the race in the satellites. I don't know whether we've conquered the earth yet, so that we can also go now fight that race. But that's a different question. How are our journalists going to bring all this, to contextualize all these things to their audiences, so that the audiences are able, the public is able to make sense? Why are we up in the skies? Of what value? Is that investment worth it? I was very keen to hear the vice minister for, that minister is in charge of what? Science. Explaining the justification for, I hope the radio people, they could package that to the listeners. So, amidst all these fast-moving world and complex issues, what is the state of our media? Again, looking at the report, gleaning the summary, I find that it's consistent with other studies which have been done by UNESCO, ILO, and other people, and also with our own findings as Media Council, that indeed, our media is struggling. The media economy across, especially in the upcountry. In Kampala here, you can sugarcoat it a bit. The media houses have a bit of resources, but across the country, in some places, media houses cannot run a generator for 24 hours. They run part-time. You find an individual is the manager, is the accountant, is the field reporter, is the receptionist. When will this person have time to research content and present it to the listeners in a manner that makes sense? No wonder, as Mr. Sempala said, we end up regurgitating what the newspapers in Kampala have said. If you can get the New Vision and Monitor, you'll be sure that maybe there's fair gatekeeping there. You read that to your listeners, and the day is made. So, the media houses themselves are in very bad shape, the media economy. Many cannot pay their workers, they don't give contracts, they can't meet their bills, they can't run 24 hours. And the journalists themselves, in the workshops we've held across the country, severally, across the country. In one workshop in Gulu, out of 52 participants, only 8, this was in 2020, only 8 said they had got some professional training in journalism. 52, and only 8. But these are the people we're expecting to do all these things, to explain the global impact and inform the people. So we have a challenge there. And then you have the problem of brain drain. In Uganda, for some reason, many of us, myself, I'm a journalist by training and practice for some years, but along the way, I lost my way and I went into PR, and now I'm a lawyer. Because I could not sustain, we go to the same markets with everybody else, If I look in front of me here, Moses here, Dr. Ambaine, and others. Most of the people, when just they're about to master the craft, they are poached and they go away. So you have a new crop. So for those who are into training, just know that you keep sowing the seed afresh. There is no mentorship, the seed does not grow. Just as it's about to germinate, it's taken away, so you start afresh. And that is the kind of prayer we have to deal with. We could talk about the challenges. I mean, the unprofessionalism, in Uganda, among the journalists or the practitioners. Again, I prefer to use the word the practitioners because, again, we are not agreed whether journalism is even a profession in this country or whether it should be a profession, whether it should be, you know. So among the practitioners, it is okay to be corrupt, but they won't use the word corruption, to accept brown envelopes because the employers aren't paying them. So they find a way of, and within us, it has been justified now. So how will such a journalist or practitioner do the kind of things we want to do? So I could go on and on about on that side. But let me talk about now what can be done as I try to wind up from our perspective. One, our licensing regime, I think, needs to be reviewed. I know UCC has been trying to introduce things every time, additional requirements, but it seems our licensing regime emphasizes getting revenue from the media owners. You get a license and then that's it. We don't follow enough, we don't. As I said earlier, many of the media houses are dead persons walking. Envision a scenario where dead people in Uganda, instead of being buried, are left to walk among us, the living. That is the scenario we have. No one wants to talk about it, we scout around it. We need to review the licensing framework. Do we want journalism or we want these things, the owners look at these things as business, first and foremost, and as a political tool. Come the next 5 years, I'll have a voice, I will play this. Beyond that, in the midst of that, they don't see a public service role. So Mr. Watasa, Mr. Commissioner, in terms of policy, actually I want to say this, that it is time to merge some of the media houses. The weak ones should merge with the stronger ones. Imagine a district, a poor district without any business, no business is being generated in the town. But you have 5 radio stations overlapping one another in the frequency. Can't we see that? Why not merge and have a stronger media house in that area? You know, I think it will serve the common good, serve the purpose better. The other one, of course, is mentorship, training, continuous training. I don't know, okay, I understand, my time is up. Let me just complete this sentence. I don't know what can be done to attract, to maintain, to retain mentors in the newsrooms so that these people can be able to work. You go to the House of Commons, the people who report for the BBC, they are well into their 70s. They are encyclopedia of themselves. But in Uganda, you find, so that's another thing. The other is legal reform, but Mr. Watasa may talk about it. I know that the law is being reformed. There are proposals. There's a bill in the making to reform how the media in Uganda is run. I could talk more, but I want to respect the time. Thank you very much.
Another hand clap for Mr. Okello. Forgive me for putting you under too much pressure. I promised people that we would be on time today, so we're trying to keep that promise. It's interesting what you mentioned, though, about having a small town that has 5 radio stations. I know there are people who do quite a bit of work with the radios here, and I could see from the reactions that that is absolutely spot on. And I wonder if maybe that's something that the ministry could speak into in terms of when people are getting their licenses, for example, to say, look, there are 6 radio stations in that district, we can't give you another license in there. I don't know. I think our commissioner is very well placed to say those things and tell us a bit more about his thoughts on the findings as we then launch the report. So allow me now to invite the Commissioner for Communication and Information Dissemination at the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, my boss and very good friend, Moses Watasa. Please give him a big, big hand clap as he comes.
Okay, good morning. All protocol observed. My name is Moses, as introduced. For purposes of this, I'm Moses. I'm not the commissioner. I'm here to share, but also learn. Let me say this. Thanks, Peter. The media has grown tremendously in Uganda, and this is a result of liberalization by the government in the mid-1990s. Peter, you remember that, and Robert. So the media has grown phenomenally. Actually, now the debate is that, is it viable, like Peter is saying. There's a time I was in Chivoga, and I was received by a gentleman who happened to be a receptionist, but he also a newsreader. He's also the accountant. I paid him. Then he also hosted me for a talk show. So I asked him, what are you trained in? He said, Sebo, not to be caller. And I think, Peter, the Media Council, these are the issues you are grappling with. Professionalism, credibility, quality of content. The other thing I've noticed, because I also advertise with even my friends here, George Chigozi, the media has grown much faster than the advertising base in Uganda. We know, for example, that we have, I was checking with UCC, we have now 327 radio stations. You can imagine, 327, all of them competing for an advert from MTN, maybe Uganda breweries. It's not viable, friends. And I think the point Peter was raising is very valid, and I associate myself with it. We need to consider merging some of the radio stations. In fact, even the spectrum, which you are talking about, Peter, it's also running out. And that's why you see, as you drive, I come from Eastern Uganda. You are driving here, a radio is running into another. You are trying to tune, a radio is, every 15 kilometers you go. We can't sustain all these radios. And true, Peter, what you said, we are reviewing the policy. We're also looking at the law, which has a component to do with registering radios and TV stations. We call it the new Bill 2022. Let me cite it correctly. The Information and Communication Bill 2022, where we are going to look at issues of spectrum. We are going to encourage mergers. And it's actually taking place already. You remember some time back, Vision Group, for example, acquired Radio West. My friends here, Next Media, they're operating more like a hub. I think sustainability as part of the innovation should be, how do media houses share resources? For example, production of content, probably outsourcing even things like news. Because like Peter said, I've been up country, I travel a lot. You find a radio is regurgitating news from a newspaper. They can't afford even to hire proper journalists. They can't train them. They can't pay them well. Most of them are actually freelance reporters, Robert, not so. And I can tell you they are so poorly paid. And that's why probably my friend here became a PR, and then now he's a lawyer. And you can see now he's wearing a good suit. Peter. So these are issues we need to talk about as we talk about the viability of the media. Some of the radios, we will have to merge them. Because you can't have a radio which has probably one or two staff, like the one I don't want to mention here, but it's a radio based in Chivoga. You know, they can't pay journalists, they can't. So we are also looking at the policy where we acknowledge the emergence of digital media technology for purposes of harnessing content, production, processing. There are so many formats now. We also have, by the time I checked with UCC, we have 48 online publishing firms in Uganda today. I am talking the likes of Mulengera, Chimp Reports. So these are harnessing a lot into ICT, and actually their operating costs are much lower than, let's say, a firm which has a printing facility, office space, you have to buy newsprint. So these are actually quite highly viable. But also the COVID lockdowns affected the media a lot in Uganda. You remember even our own vision group had the titles that wound up, Peter, you remember? Orumuri, Etop, and the other one is Rupinyi. We are trying to support them as government to revive these newspapers, probably in the next 4 or 5 months. But COVID impacted the media greatly because businesses shut down. So that means advertising also goes with that. But also, people couldn't distribute newspapers. I come from the East. If you don't have private vehicles moving, they couldn't. And this means for the media to survive, you need to innovate, you need to be versatile, you need to multi-skill. If you're a journalist today, I keep challenging UBC, which is under our ministry. You'll find a guy, he's a reporter, but sometimes he cannot edit a story. So I tell them, for you to survive in the media as it is changing, you need to be a producer, you need to read news, you need to anchor news, you need to do interviews. If you're a young journalist and you are here today, you have to multi-skill in order to survive. Then I also want to talk about the media you can consider sharing resources. There are small media houses I work with. I don't know whether my friend, there's a small newspaper called Homeland News. I was telling him, why should you import a printer when you hardly sell even 10,000 copies of a newspaper? Why don't you work with a media house which already has printing facilities? Because these costs are going to be too high for you to bear. Next media, maybe you have Printeries or Vision Group or NMG. But we have also seen acquisitions. NMG has also acquired, I think, Dembe FM. For us, as a ministry, we support the innovations. That's why we are even developing systems under our ministry for processing data, retrieving data, formatting data. The ministry has an innovations program under which we support young people like yourselves to develop systems. Robert, we acknowledge issues of harassment of journalists that you are talking about. We've talked about this with the Media Council. We have a subcommittee of cabinet chaired by my minister, which continuously looks at issues of torture. You remember the images at the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, ironically, by the way. Those pictures were so disturbing to us, even as government. So there's a commitment to continuously address these issues so that we have a viable media, but also a vibrant media. I want to thank all protocol observed. I know there's DW here, there's Aga Khan, the university, there's, there are many. I want to thank you all for bringing us here. The report is of interest to us. As I'm here talking, the minister is chairing a meeting somewhere. He knows I'm here. Please give me some 2 or 3 copies so that I share with them, us as management, but also as policy level is cabinet. And by the way, we are just taking a new communication policy. Robert, I shared this with you. We are taking a new communication policy to cabinet, probably in January, so we can pick some of these issues and mainstream them in the policy. Those who want to know more about what is in the policy, you can get in touch with me because at technical level, I am also leading the process of developing that policy. So I highlight for you what we are doing because these are policies for not the ministry, but for all of us, including the media, the academia, the civil society, my friend Robert, Media Council, my friend Adolf, long time. So I want to thank you and wish you a good day. We are available. I am going to leave my contact here so that, because I know we cannot exhaust everything here. Thank you so much. Ndugu, good to see you again. And the good job you do as usual. Blessings and good luck from our ministry. Thank you.
Thank you. Please stay with me, Commissioner. I want to embarrass you. If you can come to this side so I can embarrass you and people can see you properly. So, Commissioner Watasa is, I think, in my very humble but strong opinion, one of the, if not the most efficient and effective civil servant. And I think he deserves a big, big hand clap. For those of us who are in the media fraternity here, Robert and Joe and Dr. Mbine will tell you, you will find very few people in the government as supportive as he is. He's always fighting for us, he's always supporting us, he's always doing things for us, and we honor you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And in that vein, I'd like us to launch this report. So I'm going to ask our keynote speakers to come. So Robert, if you'd please come. Mr. Okello, if you'd please come. I'll ask Julia to please join us. Dr. Rose Kimani as well. I'll ask Amelia to come as well. And Professor George to represent AKU, please do come as well. Let's get a copy of this report and do a photo op. This will also work as our launch for this report, and then we'll go into our next part, which will be a panel discussion. Dr. Rose, I hope you'll be happy that there's at least 3 women represented here. So it was very interesting, some of the findings that you were talking about in this report. And again, I'm sure you'll probably get a copy. It's one worth delving into and dissecting a bit, because it's got some very interesting insights. Okay, here's Dr. Rose. See, it's not as bad as the 20% in the report, yeah? The representation of women here in terms of diversity is at least, I think 35 or 40%, so we're making good progress, right? For the cameraman, can you please make sure, okay, so we're looking to the camera at the front. Best smiles on. All right, and this serves as our official launch for the report. I think Caleb had mentioned we have a QR code in case someone wants to get a soft copy. We'll put that up on the screen at some point so you can be able to use your phones and download that. And once again, a big thank you to our speakers and panel. And yeah, we are done. So we have launched officially. No confetti. Our confetti is digital. We'll put the chairs back on as we go into our panel discussion, and we're going to be talking a little bit about what you've just heard in terms of this report, State of Innovation and Media Viability in East Africa. To help guide this panel, I'm going to invite Amelia Martha Nachitimbo, who is a seasoned journalist. She's been head of news and current affairs department at CTV, one of the new channels on the market until April this year. But while she was there, she had a very interesting task of leading a team of 30 people right in the middle of COVID. So Amelia started her job just at about the time COVID hit. She had to lead a team of 30 people through that turbulent time, and she was able to somehow navigate through that process. Before that, she's been a news coordinator for Africa News, which is part of the Euronews group, working with at least 80 multilingual correspondents across the continent. And she's also taken on assignments in Uganda, Congo, Brazzaville, South Africa, Cote d'Ivoire. She's been an anchor, a reporter, an editor, a manager. So she's done an incredible job in the field, and she'll be guiding our panel for the next 40 minutes. Please give Amelia a big, big hand clap as she comes.
Thank you very much, Ben. It's a privilege to be here. Joining me for the panel discussion are gentlemen whom I'll be inviting very shortly. I'm aware that we do not have much time. Dr. Adolphe Mbine, please give a round of applause for him. He's now into academics and research and has done his studies at Makerere University and has gone to South Africa as well. Hundreds and thousands, actually, of media scholars have gone through his hands, not just at bachelor's level, but at PhD level and master's level. And he's very passionate about media policy and regulation, which is partly what we've been talking about. And we're looking forward to hearing more from you, sir. And the other person who'll be joining me is Dr. George Lugalambi. He's the new Executive Director of the African Center for Media Excellence. He is the coordinator of the Uganda Media Sector Working Group. That's a group that is attempting to unify all the media groups, because somehow we are not one. And he'll be telling us more about that. He has initiated and managed media projects in Ghana, Nigeria, Tanzania, Guinea, Conakry, Myanmar, and Lebanon. Very welcome, sir. And last but not least is someone I'll call a super chiraka. Those who play football, you know who a chiraka is, right? That player that you need when you're really stuck. That person who can fit in anywhere and help you with everything. Yeah, so he is, first of all, a sports enthusiast, a sports presenter who has worked very quickly through the ranks and risen to becoming one of the youngest CEOs, if not the youngest CEO in television in Uganda. He's a great salesperson. He has built brands for about 15 years and is now the group deputy CEO of Next Media. And he has also previously worked as the CEO of Buganda Kingdom's BBS Tedefina. Please, let's give a round of applause for Joseph Joe Chigozi. Okay, so for the young people, I know that most of the conversation we've had this morning has been very heavy on research and policy, and yet yesterday you told us that you need, a bit of like infotainment, edutainment. So this is going to be my attempt at bringing a bit of fun into the research or the report that we've just launched. And I hope I don't fail miserably. So I'm taking you on a mentor movie. How I see this research that has just been launched is, imagine MCI Hub, the entire hub, and all the different rooms we have is the region of East Africa. And the different rooms are the different countries. So imagine if this place were dark, there's no electricity. Those of you who were here yesterday, that shouldn't be very hard to imagine, because we had a bit of that here. So you're moving in here. This is a room full of academicians, researchers, media managers, and it's dark, remember? So you're just moving around and bumping into each other. You somehow know from the things you're bumping into that maybe there are people, there are chairs, there are cables, there are tables, there are cameras. You suspect that they're there, but you don't really know what the chairs look like, what size they are, how many they are. So what this research has done, or what the AKU Graduate School of Mass Communication and DW Academy is, they got binocular glasses and they were somehow able to scan through these very dark rooms. And then through picking out the pieces of research, they started giving out night vision glasses to different people. Yeah, so the night vision glasses, if it lands on the researchers and the media managers, well and good, because they're able to see and have a vision of what's going on into the rooms. If it falls onto maybe any other person, if it's a content creator, influencer, well, yesterday you told us you don't care who gives you the information as long as it's accurate and well-researched. Well, still very good for you. But it may also land on journalists. Maybe the journalist is the one who gets the night vision, but unfortunately, they don't have the influence to do anything with the information they've seen in these rooms. So what we are hoping for is that enough policymakers, enough influential people in government, enough media owners are the ones who are going to pick this report, and that's what we are calling night vision goggles. And then they'll be able to use the information to organize and say, okay, maybe put these chairs this way, make the people sit here, put the cameras like this, so that we have order. And eventually, by doing that, they'll sort of be giving out, they'll be giving like bulbs, to the different people in the room. So what would a perfect country or perfect region look like? When you all have those light bulbs and you're lighting, that's what that research will do for us. If we don't read it, if we don't use it, we'll stay in the dark and we'll be bumping into each other and we won't be helping each other. But when the right people get that right information and use it, then maybe we shall have the media that we are looking out for. So that was my attempt at breaking that down for the young people especially who want good pictures. Yes, so let's go into our panel discussion. I'll start by asking the gentleman here, having read the report, and because we've mentioned that in the media landscape, somehow we know, we have an idea, some of these things are not really surprising. Is there anything that surprised you this time around in the findings that have been presented? Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, our moderator today, and of course, all protocol observed. What surprised me? She asked me this question at 6 a.m. And what surprised me, of course, I've scanned through the report. I think it's a wonderful report. The summary, I wouldn't have, thought any different from what is in this report. I think it's very, very, rich. But all the things said in this report, from a Ugandan perspective, I think, are spot on. We need to be honest with ourselves. There are things we see, there are things we talk about, and things that we can change. What surprised me, of course, was the Kenyan perspective. I was not surprised that 46% of Ugandans participated. Ugandans, we have a tendency, and I'm included, not to participate in things that are important to us. That's wrong. We need to change it, because someone needed this information. This information is going to change all of us. And that's, for me, one observation. But what surprised me was that when you look at the Kenyan media landscape, at least I've been there for some time, and because of the economy of Kenya, you think that just an advert costs about $1,000, more than $1,000. And when I was reading a bit of the report, I realized that it's in Uganda that, a business venture would replace a news story. Yet you thought it should be in Kenya, because media houses in Kenya, and I want to be corrected, make, relatively more money than the ones in Uganda. I've been to Citizen, I've been to Standard Group, I've been to NTV, because of, again, the economy. If the cost of an advert is $1,000 or more than that, 2,000 actually, if you like. In Uganda, it's probably, 20,000. I know radios who, advertisers pay 20,000 for an advert per run of 30 seconds. So that surprised me, because I thought it's in Uganda where we should actually, want to make more money and, dupe a news story. So that was a bit surprising.
And I think what they've just told us is, if you invest, you get the return. So are we investing? Because eventually the information we feed to the people also brings the returns to the economy. And maybe something related. I noticed that, for instance, in Uganda, compared to Kenya, we lead a lot more with political stories, yet the Kenyans put a little more emphasis on business stories. So it shouldn't be surprising that the journalism we invest in or do not invest in is what brings back. And also, somehow, to be fair to the Ugandans, on the response rate, when it comes to numbers, we almost had the same number of respondents. It's only that I think when they contacted, the time they tried to contact us was when we had the social media challenges at the beginning of the year. So just to be a bit fair to the Ugandan respondents. Yes, to the other panelists, what surprised you about this report? Dr. Mbeni, do you want to go first, or should we go, Dr.? Yes. He can go first, okay. I think it's on.
Okay. So thank you, Amelia. Perhaps for me, I think it's not so much that something surprised me, as it is that I found a very interesting point of research, which I think doesn't, and to date, in my view, hasn't been, tackled very well. That's the issue of the relationship between, investment in journalism and the news product, the quality of the news. Because I'm seeing some data here, results about, that correlation, and I think they even attempt to do a statistical correlation to see whether investment in news resources, has, whatever kind of relationship it might have with news products. So for me, I think that alone, because we've always had a hunch, and oftentimes we speculate that if you invest in the news resource, in the newsrooms, you invest, in capacity, that will improve your journalism. But oftentimes it's something we have speculated about, theorized about. So I think the interesting thing for me is, for once now, to have actual evidence that you can actually use to take a position on whether actually investing in resources, in news resources. And remember, we're talking about investing in journalism, and investing in journalism is about investing the resources in the capacities of journalists to do their job, improving their capacities in terms of training, and the organization I lead, that's pretty much our core business, building those capacities. And I think when you have evidence like this, it's a lot easier to make the case that it makes a difference when resources are invested in news gathering. News gathering, is part of the value chain that delivers the news, the media products. And so it is important, people who are investing in these media products. So when we talk about this proliferation of newsrooms, or rather proliferation of news media organization, wherever they are, though I wonder whether, if you're talking about even things like from a policy level, merging media organizations. I mean, if I started my own company, you can't tell me to merge it with someone else's. So I think it's the market,
That's a question we shall be exploring later.
The market will sort those issues out. But I think the question of if those particular media organizations, wherever they are, I think it's very important to look at this evidence and understand that investing in the news product ultimately is going to improve the quality of journalism and eventually the financial results and hopefully the performance as well. Thank you.
Okay, indeed. And I think now we can go to a question of, is it that we do not want to invest or we do not have the money? And maybe Joe can give us tips on where to get the money from. But let's first quickly hear from Dr. Mbeine on what surprised him about the findings of this report.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and I think I enjoy speaking out to several people, including the people at the helm of policy, because policy, helps us to unleash the tools that are necessary for us to create a kind of media system that we want. And I'm happy that my friend is here. Is Moses still here where he has gone? But there is also our colleague and friend from the Media Council. I was pleasantly surprised that the report actually was able to link the key things I would consider at the macro level of industry, like the politics, the economy, community enthusiasm, and so on, with the micro issues of industry, like the quality of personnel, the investment, and so on, that owners put into our media industry. Because when you don't look at the larger issues, you are likely to risk being simplistic about very key issues, because media viability stands at the core center of media existence. And the media and journalism cannot be helpful to society if it is weak and vulnerable. The extent to which society can benefit from the media is functionally related to how strong and resilient the media is or are in the first place. And so I'm happy about the report because it links all these issues together. And from even a policy perspective, we are always looking towards what kind of media do we want? I think in Uganda, we are not quite resolved about the particular roles that the media should play in society. We have our own ideas as the media industry. Government and other state actors probably have their own idea or ideas about what the media should be. But we need to be resolved on what kind of media that we want. If you ask,
who should give us that definition?
I think we should have a conversation and resolve that this is the kind of media and therefore the media system that we want in the country. If you asked the president, he would probably give you his own idea about what kind of media he wants to see. But that could be easily contradistinguished from what I think or what Joe as a key player in the media also thinks. And we have all these kinds of ideas about where we want to be. And so when Mr. Moses Watasa comes here and say they are preparing a policy, they are working on a law, I'm here wondering what kind of media do we want? Because if we want a certain media system in the country, then we can have the relevant policies and laws for that particular system. We can also decide as a country that we are going even to fund, to some extent, certain media because they answer to the aspirations of the people in a specific way. If you go to the Scandinavian countries, for example, they do public funding for certain media, even private media. But they have very good reasons for it, and everybody understands that this is necessary for the public to do in order to ensure that the country moves forward, because they realize that the media is important in certain or all aspects of the country's development process.
And maybe that's what the Uganda Media Sector Working Group might do for us or might attempt to do. But let me first come back to Joe. We had talked about the question of investment. And we talked about how, well, media viability is what we're talking about, which is usually we do not have the resources to support quality journalism. And it's a question of quality journalism, which includes independence, like has been talked about earlier already. How are you able to sustain the media organizations? I mean, they're talking about merging. Well, at Next Media, you're launching almost a new media entity every other day. How are you able to do it, especially post-COVID?
That's a very interesting question. Of course, I'm not going to tell you our trade secrets. As the chief of strategy for the group, of course, I can delve into some of the things we're trying to do. But I can tell you, I've been in the media for the last 15 or 16, 17 years, running media houses. I can tell you, just to run a television alone, you need not less than 300 million a month. Yeah. So media viability means you must have a very clear strategy on how, one, you're going to create content for sustainability. Of course, it starts with content. There is no way you'll make sustainability unless you've got great content. That's one. Two, but most importantly, before even we talk about content, the right people, investment in the people. I think it's understated. People means the journalists, the producers, the news anchors, researchers, name it. Now, what we are trying to do at Next Media is to invest in our people. Investment in people is very expensive. I've had a chance to move around the world. I've been to Deutsche Welle, I've been to Citizen, I've been to the BBC. I can tell you, the one thing that's very clear is that there's a lot of investment. Now, in Uganda and Africa, we need to invest in people. We need to have quality journalists. Now, are we doing it? I think it's work in progress, but it's also very expensive. Are we investing in the right tools and equipment, enablement of the journalists? Are we retooling them? Innovation. Because today, to do the best story, you actually don't need to have the best camera. But how many young journalists know that? You actually need your phone. A good phone, a smartphone, will give you a good story. But we need to train our journalists. It's not about the equipment alone. Yes, it's a good to have. But do you have the skills that can enable you to do a good story? Do you understand what a good story would be? And I think that's very important. But also, there's a very thin line between good journalism, good newsmaking, and business. We need to balance. You can't survive. The merger you've been talking about, you actually don't need to talk about magic. I can tell you radios close every day. Why? Because they don't have a business model. You get it? So it's very, very important to realize that to survive in the media, you need to create about 4 arms: the people, the content, the business ideas, the innovative ideas for you to be able to survive. Otherwise, you are going to close down with your great ideas. You're going to close down with the good journalists. So I think it's very important to have this discussion, and this report has brought it out. Media viability means that it's not easy for you to just come in and create a radio station. You need to have a plan. You cannot just come in to start a TV station. You need to have a plan. But also sponsorship or advertising has gone down. I can tell you, our neighbors Kenyans have actually, not fired, but they've actually let go of about 300 journalists. In Tanzania, it's the same story, and all that. When you do that research, you realize that yes, media houses are suffering. So the question is, we need to be as innovative as we should to survive. Actually, we are in a survival mode. I can tell you from where I stand, advertising going down as your major source of revenue, you're going to have to make, very bad decisions to let go of some journalists.
And on that very note, you've talked about advertising going down and being innovative. And one of the other revenue sources that we're looking at is subscription model. I understand that you're trying to do something with Afromobile to see how to bring the subscribers to yourself. How is that experience going with audiences?
So let me ask, how many of you have heard about Afromobile? Just put up your hand. You have. So how many of you have paid? Just 5,000 shillings a month. Do you know why? For 5,000 shillings a month, you have access to 50 television stations. You have access to 30 radio stations. But how do we sustain giving you that content? Through your subscription. So media viability means that yes, Afromobile is a game changer, but it must be viable. So that's why we're creating a platform where you can pay as low as 5,000 for you to access all these platforms. So
that was a very interesting thing that I saw, because there's something about why audiences pull back. Maybe we also need to understand why is it that our audiences do not want to pay for the content, because there's awareness very clearly, but there's a reluctance to pay for that content, but that's something that we can go into later on. I'd love to give the audience a chance to ask questions, but let's first get this question. In where do we go from now? Because we have a media owner, we shall call you a media owner, we have a media trainer and a researcher. Is there any part of this report, or what part of this report is going to influence your approach to what you do going forward? Or how are you going to use these findings to change your approach to how you teach people, to how you're training, and how you're working with corporates and strategizing for your media organization? We can start with you, Dr. Mbeine.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, I love this report as somebody who teaches students and also does research. Actually, it comes on the heels of a country report that I had co-authored with Paul Chimumwe on media viability in Uganda. But for us, we did desk research, and these people went into the field. And so it's complementary to what we had already published in last year, and I'm happy to receive it. It is very important because it deepens the understanding of the problem, And from this report, we can also pursue policy and other advocacy issues around the media and where we want the media to be in the coming time. Because media freedom, media viability, what we talk about actually, even in the media viability, also includes issues of basic media freedom. You can have a very good model, a business model, innovation, and so on. And if you have the kind of convoluted politics that we have in this region, government can close you down and you are no longer viable. Yes, there are also economic decisions that are taken that are fundamentally problematic to the media in terms of taxation, for example, and so many other things. So it is very, very important for us to continue to advocate for an environment in which the media can thrive. And they are very clear and existential threats to media freedom, even media viability. So this report gives us the kind of springboard that we need, because you can't negotiate with government and so on and other key actors unless you have information. Once you have good information, verified information, then you can negotiate yourself out of certain challenges in terms of policy, in lawmaking, and other important and executive decisions that are taken in places where you don't sit. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Lugalambi, as someone running ACME right now, in terms of media training, and your aspiration is to see excellent media, not just in Uganda, but across the region, and also the other hat as the coordinator of the Uganda Media Sector Working Group, what part of this report are you going to put into action? How is it going to influence your work going forward?
I think there is a bigger message coming out of this report, and Joe and Adolf have touched on it. I think this is the issue of the intersections of various things in this report. Because if you ask about media viability, what are those points, that actually make media viable? And oftentimes we talk about media in a very broad sense, but we also need to ask ourselves, and I think this report goes a long way to interrogate this question, that what are those building blocks of media viability? Joe talks about, which I think is a very important point, about journalism. Journalism is just one component of media. There's so many things that occupy media, but journalism is just one of those things. And what does it take to have and produce quality journalism? It takes content, it takes the craft, right? So I always believe that the craft is a lot easier to master. Give any 10-year-old kid a tool, he or she is going to do great things. So the craft is, for me, is actually very easy to pick up. In fact, for any age, at any age. But the content, for me, as we say, content is king. There has to be a proper mastery of the subject matter. Let's not always forget that what we deliver that actually people consume is really content. And that's really, for me, fundamentally has to be the driver, of, as a very key driver, of viable media. So we need to break it down. And I think the report does a good job of interrogating all these different building blocks. And all of us are working in different spaces. Some of us are working on building capacities around subject matter. MCI is doing a lot around, building capacities around the craft. And there are going to be other people, and a lot of other players. HRNJ, working on the, space and the civic space issues, the political environment, how that is important. So I take that very important message for me around all these intersections and the importance of us, having that, helicopter view really of all those different building blocks that are very critical to make the media viable and sustainable. And even as the media sector working group, it's very much about, working around those issues of policy and, collaborating with the ministry to have those conversations about the kind of media system and media policies that will be able to deliver the viability that we want.
Okay, thank you very much. Joe, as Chief of Strategy, without giving out your strategy, but partly touching on that, is this report going to change or influence or inform how you strategize going forward?
Certainly. I mean, this is a very fine report. Credit to all the partners who have done a wonderful job. I think this is a good start in the right direction. Information is critical. Having the right information and research, something that, of course, is lacking in our media. I think investment in research is so critical. Understanding the audiences we appeal to, the demographics, and all that. So yes, we'll use this document. But I think what is critical, again, is when you think about Ugandan media, I mean, we are growing as part of, every other sector. But it's important that we have these discussions at a policy level. It's important we discuss, the idea of the quality of the people we have. We need to be honest about it. And I think there is hope. There's hope. There's hope, and I believe we shouldn't lose hope. This information is going to be very, very important to whoever is going to consume it. Our role is to use our platforms to be able to communicate this to all the necessary people who are in charge of policy, who are in charge of managing these media houses. And of course, to the young people, all is not lost. Journalism mirrors our society. Our media our journalism is as good as what we are. Our vision as Next Media, of course, is to try and inform, to transform. We keep asking our journalists, the story you're doing, is it going to transform Uganda? Is it going to transform someone? That's the question you need to ask yourself. And that starts with you as a person. But it starts with the training, the content is just talked about. Why am I doing that story? To what end? And stuff like that. So for me, I am very happy to be here. I'm very happy to say that this report has done us a lot of justice. It's a starting point. And I want to thank MCI. We need to clap for MCI. And all the partners, Next Media, I'll use this platform because I know everyone is watching online, to say that we've absorbed over 60% of MCI, students. They are working either as producers, they are working as, news anchors and stuff like that, because the quality of MCI, has improved. I must say they're putting in the work. They're trying to improve the quality of the journalists. So yes, if you ask me, we are going to use a lot of this information. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. And a big round of applause also for the Aga Khan University and DW Academy for this report. So very quickly, I don't know in the audience if we have any questions. I'm seeing one there. I would be interested in questions, especially from people who are from outside of Uganda. If you have questions for these gentlemen. I've seen 2 hands. There's one hand there. If I can get a microphone there. There's a gentleman over there. And then there's a hand at the back. Keep the questions very brief. We have little time.
Thank you so much. My name is Noah Omuya. First, I am a Media Challenge Initiative product. I was in a Media Challenge Fellowship. That was 2019. Now, I want to start with what Chief of Strategy mentioned. When you think of media in Uganda, what comes to your mind? Number one that comes to my mind, it's about gambling. According to Commissioner, he said, because of the liberty this government has given to our country, the ground is now fertile. That I can wake up and also throw my dice. Maybe I will make it or I will not make it, but I'll be a media owner. And then what happens later? The report informs us of the quality of the content that we produce. And Mr. Chief of Strategies has kept on talking about investment on the people who produce the content. Still, we are all gambling. I don't know why Mr. Okello and Commissioner are not on that panel. I wanted us to have a discussion, maybe in the next media festival. We have to think of how do we professionalize journalism practice in Uganda.
Okay, thank you, Noah.
Thank you.
Let's have a question. I hope it's a question. Please keep it very short because we don't have very much time. No, there,
Because
the other side. She raised her hand first.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nadia. I'm working for the Civil Peace Service in Kenya with a focus on media and arts, on conflict sensitivity. But I was working with DW Academy before, and my question is really like on the community radio stations and the importance of them, because apparently it's about, at the end, it's about the user and the community and the trust we have in them, right? So my question would be, how many of these 500 media houses that were targeted are actually community radio stations? And then also, are there certain outcomes when it comes to that? So basically, what are the most important needs? I know there's not one size fit all solution, but I would be really interested in that. Thank you.
I think the question of how many community radios, you can find it in the report. The report is already, there's an e-version on the websites, yes. Yeah, that question is already answered. The third hand was there. I'm going with the people who raised their hands first.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Jotham Ali Naito from Uganda Christian University. My question is, I realize that media houses, you are big stakeholders to these telecom companies. And for example, the way you have told us, for example, AfroMobile, we subscribe to it 5,000, but realize we have again to buy data to see the content. How have you played a big role to these media companies, either to reduce for us data? For example, if I'm buying every day, I subscribe 5,000, I have to buy data of 2,000 to see this content. That is going to demoralize us from accessing that data. Thank you so much.
Do you want to answer that very fast?
Yeah. The good news is that we are working to partner with them. We want to reduce on the cost of the data. It's in their interest. It's in their interest to reduce on the data so that you can be able to access the content. So the partnerships are going on. We'll announce them, in good time. Yeah.
Okay. We had a question over there. Not the one who is raising up their hand. Yes.
Thank you. Still on the Ayoba app, I happen to be a subscriber. To Mr. Chigozi, I think we lack inclusivity when it comes to that app. Why we have actually refused to pay the 5,000 is because there is no NTV. How about you strike a deal with Nation Media and then be inclusive, please. Be inclusive, please.
Does that mean?
So he has asked a very interesting question. Why haven't we included? So that tells me this app is very big, isn't it? So we are saying you should write to them and ask them, why are you not on AfroMobile? Because AfroMobile is open. But let me say this. This is a business model, isn't it? It's part of our innovation and survival. And we welcome, by the way, we welcome every content producer. If you're a content producer out there and you meet our terms and conditions, you're welcome. So what we're saying is we don't discriminate anyone being part of AfroMobile. I think it's a question of business model, terms and conditions, and all that. But we're trying to build something bigger than us. We want to have a platform which on your phone, because you see media, as we are talking about media innovation, today, everything is going on the phone. The phone is becoming everything. That's where you pay your bills. That's where you WhatsApp. That's where you tweet. That's where you take pictures from. So we are trying to get everyone on board. So please, you need to tell them to apply to be on the platform. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take just one more question from here, Tanzania.
Thank you very much. I don't have a question, but I have an opinion. Many media outlets are confusing that having a lot of subscriptions, it's a guarantee for you to be successful, but I can tell you that's not a guarantee. You can have a lot of subscribers, but they don't have purchasing power. And you can have a very few subscribers, but they have a very big purchasing power. A classic example can be in Sweden, there's 10 million people who have been subscribed to the internet, but in TZ we have 30 million people who have been subscribers to the internet. But if you take the YouTube reports, you came to realize that they make a lot of money from Sweden rather than Tanzania. So for media house to design relevant business models, you must have an insights from internal and external, but you cannot have insights if you don't have a data-driven systems within your media outlets which inform you on how you can make a data-driven business decisions. So for media house to be relevant and to design relevant business model, first of all, we should have a data-driven systems which give you a certain kind of insights for you to make decisions.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, to our panel, thank you very much for your insights, for staying with us. I'm just going to ask, especially the two doctors here, are you going to use this research to commission more research that can further the information gaps that are still here? For example, we noticed, of course, there are some biases to those who answered. A lot of men, for instance, which does not bring the female perspective, or sometimes when we answer, we look at things in a grand way. I mean, they talked about payment being good, which is not usually the case when you go down. But someone told me, actually, it might be true because the people who are responding have good pay, and that answers pay disparities. So as you go back to your students and as you go back to the people you'll be training, the media people, do you commit to making sure that we have more research that follows or furthers this? Yes or no?
A big yes, of course. I mean, the more good research you have, the better. In research, we talk about triangulation. So if I have this research, and Adolph's research, and AKU research, and MCI research, I can, triangulate all that, and I have the best position, whether for business and so on and so forth. So more good research, the better for everybody as a media.
So if we said that this research was good, you've just heard that we are going to have even more research following this so that we have more information that is given out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to us, and you can give a big round of applause to our panel. Thank you.